Okay, I'm gonna keep all of these up here, make it a little more legible. And then what we'll do is after I introduce the panel members, we will not only address your questions, but also address some of the lessons learned. Do you all have your written questions? Those of you that actually have prepared some? If you do, please hand them to that gentleman in the back of the room so we can bring them forward and take care of them for you. So I'm going to briefly introduce the remaining panel members. Thank you for enlightening us with the lessons learned. In addition to Russ and Francisco, we have Deborah Jackson, who is that, no. Deborah is the Chief of IT Procurement Oversight and Consulting Branch at Department of Technology. She has over 20 years of experience managing large and complex IT projects and product development using best practices methodologies and standards in project management, process improvement, change management, and executive oversight. As a seasoned government leader, Deborah supports diverse state programs that include Department of Corrections, Healthcare Services, Controllers, Board of Equalization, and State Student Aid Commission. She provides solid and effective technology leadership to some of the most complex and politically sensitive programs in state government. Please welcome Deborah. Next, to assure you that we have all the parties at the table, we have Susan Davis James, who's basically between you and the money. Susan is the Chief of IT Consulting Unit at the Department of Finance. She has over 25 years of experience participating in various evolutions for IT project approvals, oversight, policy development, and strategic planning within the Department of Finance and the former Department of Information Technology. So she's seen it all. She's been essentially through all the trials and tribulations and is very instrumental in assisting with the transformation that approvals and procurement are going through. Susan is also a CSUS alumni. Go Susan, since I am one as well. And she completed the MIS program at Sac State. She also completed the DGS Project Management Development Program and is a graduate of IT Managers Academy. We have an ad hoc member to the team, and that's Cynthia Hayden. Cynthia is currently the Assistant Project Director of CalHERS, the Benefit Exchange. And she's here to provide project and department level testimonials about the programs that are going through development stage. Cynthia is responsible for implementation of the Health Benefit Exchange. She has over 20 years of experience and education in information systems technology. She has experience with Office of Systems Integration, and she also has experience within U.S. Army. I personally worked with Cynthia at OSI, and she's fantastic as a project manager. She's a Chico State alumni.
Go Chico.
Okay, don't break out any booze now.
No, that's at 4:30.
4:30. All right. So please welcome the panel members, and they are here to basically address your comments about the lessons learned, as well as any questions that. Could you bring those forward, please? And feel free to raise your hands and ask questions, even though you may not have written them down. So the first question, let's see, read that. Is with regards to procurement. It basically is asking, what will the new procurement document look like from 10 sections to what? And when will it be final?
It will go from 10 sections to 4, and we already have kind of templates that we're working on now. We're using on some of our newer procurements, but now this is the kind of the problem that we're looking at here is that We only use them on the procurements that we use. They're not used by the DGS delegated users. So if you have a DGS delegation, these templates probably won't be available to you for a while because they're only used by the technology department. It's a little hard to explain that, but that's basically because if you have a delegation, you're under the DGS wing. We are not. So we don't follow the same processes that they do. So unfortunately, if you're wanting to do it on your own procurements, you'll have to follow their templates until we collaborate with them. But they're actually available now. So.
Thank you, Russ. I think the next question is for approvals. It says, is S1BA to be approved similar to current concept statement approval, I believe it is? Francisco?
Yes, our thought is that we're going to continue the process the same way as today. So another TL will go out with instructions on the IT capital plan. So instead of having concept statements submitted, there'll be the S1BAs, and we figure that the time frame and the process will be the same.
Thank you, Francisco.
Oh, wait a minute, one more thing.
Toga.
Next question is also approvals. How will the new approval process affect M&O?
The S1BA should not. Again, the S1BA will place the concept statement, Section 3 of the FSR, and the rest of the process will remain the same. Now, once the new model comes about and we work out the tweaks, there may be some changes there, but as it stands today and what's coming out, it should not make a difference.
Thank you. The next question, thank you. Oh, this is a multi-level complex one. All right. Next question is, why does it take so long for approval? Susan, would you like to add? No. There's no money. I'm not answering that question.
Well, the approval process at times was very lengthy. If you're talking about the FSR feasibility study process, or you're talking about the procurement process, which are two different process approvals. We have recently just tried to change the feasibility study process where we're collaborating upfront and early with Susan's group, with the budget, the other part of Susan's finance group, which is budgets, with OTEC, which is Department of Technology, our security units, our other different divisions out there. So we're trying to work with everybody upfront to speed up the approval process. And we started this last year to try to get everybody on the same page, get everybody understanding, and provide one set of questions out to departments on feasibility studies. Work with the departments, have them answer the questions, make sure everybody's satisfied with the results, and then approve the process. We also have been working with the departments to help write the FSRs at times, guide them. We can't write it for you, but we can guide you and assist you in writing feasibility studies so that they are clearly defined. You get tunnel vision when you write them. You're so used to what it is, but an outsider reading it doesn't understand. So we try to provide those kind of points to you and guide you through it. But we do collaborate early with finance and try to get approved. We are going to be working with Russ's group, Procurements, as well. They also receive them, so he just started, so we're gonna start collaborating with Russ. So hopefully that answered the question. I don't know if it was procurement. If it is, Russ just started and he's planning to make that process a lot more streamlined. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, personally speaking, from my perspective, I actually used to work at Department of Information Technology, and this is like a family reunion for me. The traditional process was somewhat bureaucratic, and control agency behaved like a control agency and really kept its distance from departments in the context of providing the guidance and the leadership. The process that I see now is very interactive. It's basically getting involved in your business dynamics from concept all the way through teaming up with you with regards to the approvals with the legislature, finance, and I see that being somewhat different in the context of the fact that you're not going to, the length of time is not going to be as visible. You know, they're going to be part of the program helping you through the entire process. So it's going to really streamline, from what I can see, the different aspects of getting the approvals so that the whole situation is taken care of. The next question is, I believe, about the sole source that was asked earlier. It's basically asking, once a system is implemented and it uses COTS, all sole source license to support the renewal, why are the ongoing annual costs that were identified in the FSR scrutinized so much and require more documentation and have to go through DGS each time?
Okay. Don't know, but in the future, on the reportable projects that you work with us on, we probably will not require NCBs on those kind of things, just for the simple fact is we understand the business case. Does that make sense?
It does, and it just seems like it's additional work for everyone.
I can't see who's.
It's
Oh, sorry, thanks.
fine.
You know, I'm not gonna speak for what another department does. I know in how we view things, we understand, well, because we worked in the project side too. So we understand how it got there. So it doesn't make any sense to us to justify what's already part of your current business environment today, moving forward. It's constraint. It's just one of the things you have to deal with. So naturally, it does affect those types of solutions you might get. But again, that's a constraint just like any requirement you might have. So in working with us, that'll be how you'll deal with us. So going forward, again, I can't speak for another department, so.
Next question has to do with, may I get a copy of the slide presentation so that I can quickly inform my program representatives? I have 4 projects that I must get in by October. On each table, there is a sign-in sheet. Please use that to provide your contact information, and I'll make sure that each and every one of you have a copy of the entire presentation, including the. Absolutely.
Also, to remember, there's out at the training center website, upcoming events, there's a 4-hour class where we go in much more detail about the Stage 1 BA, how to fill it out, the new tools that are coming out. We're asking for SMART objectives, your goals, objectives, and metrics. So that's a very good class to be able to take. It will help you a lot, and you'll be on a waiting list, but we're also adding more classes based on the demand. So this was a very high overview. So that class, 4 hours long, and a lot of good information.
I just don't want it.
No, you can have it.
Next question is, when will the future model of procurement be rolled out?
Well, it's underway. Like I said earlier, we have some that we're starting off already, and we're doing those. We've been able to impact some of the current projects that are in flight. We have like 20 projects that we inherited in our portfolio from DGS. So some of those are in varying stages, but you'll start to see some of our new projects coming out probably in the next few months. So as these things are kind of, as you know, they take a while to build and develop. So we're hoping to get our first procurements out in probably about 2 or 3 months. So then you'll start to see probably what we believe a drastic change in this area. More dialogue, more interaction. May drive you crazy because we're going to talk to you too much. But I think most folks that we talk to about this, especially on the vendor side, are really looking forward to that interaction. And the same with the departments. We actually want to help you be successful, and we're not about bureaucracy. Like I mentioned about the things that we recognize and constraints and stuff, we understand those things going into these things. We don't want to add more onto your plate than you already have. But we want you also to think through what you really need to do. So it's a two-way street. So thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. I've given my phone number and email and everything in several different locations today. And what I'd love to see from it is that I am now going to be on some list so that when new training comes up, I'm going to get it sooner than later. Because this was totally booked by the time I was even informed about it. Is that a possibility?
I'll defer that to, can she become part of a group that gets,
I think that's the intent. I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in the design of the conference.
I do know that, I also, due to a variety of reasons, got in late. And so I received something already, I don't know if you have, regarding the security, one coming in October. So I think there was an automatic being put on the list.
oh, you're talking about these session,
I'm talking about any kind of training that you're providing that's coming up.
I think there's gonna be multiple things, because when it comes to these conferences, et cetera, that's gonna be a separate, it's managed differently than DOT, so.
Yeah.
But I know there was a list at one point.
yeah, what I'll do is I'll provide the contact information that you provide me to the panel members, and then they can essentially act accordingly. But you're already registered with this particular conference, so you'll be getting notifications about future ones coming.
That's perfect. Thank
And
you.
if you look at our website, Department of Technology, there is a section on different training opportunities. Christy Borchin is acting right now, so if you just go to the website, just search around, you'll find training and upcoming events. So we do have it there.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question right here.
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Penny Moore. I'm with the State Controller's Office, and I'm also a partner on the Fiscal Project. Years ago, the state began an initiative to develop a professional procurement classification series, and that kind of waned away, unfortunately. But, you know, with that series was a requirement for education and certification to become a professional procurement person in the state of California. Do you see that initiative perhaps being rejuvenated as a result of this effort?
I agree with you. I know what happened in that classification. It kind of dropped off the map. But I agree with you. I came from the federal government, which had a very defined professional procurement series. And I think that's kind of been detrimental in the state. We haven't had that. So again, that's where that MSU stuff comes in, because a lot of people who didn't have a procurement experience got into it, and then it's kind of, it lost its focus as far as development of staff. And so I would love personally to see that come back. I support that. I think you'll find in some of the things we're putting forward with Christy in those areas that we're looking to doing that somewhere. Don't know when though, so it's like many things, it's out there. So.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Harjeet Singh from OSI. The question is, are the training classes available they are online or they are in classroom?
I believe most of the training that we do at CTA has a classroom seminar, and they are held out at our training center out in Rancho Cordova, most of them. These seminars are usually held either here at the convention center. So they vary. It's not that we have CBT's online training or anything like that. It is more so hands-on training.
So the sign up is on a CTA website, right?
It will show the list, and it will give you the registration URL. It will have a link to the class syllabus and how to get involved and sign up.
Okay.
So yeah, just go there.
Okay.
For these events, you go to pspforum.us, and your registration is handled on that website, as well as all of these sessions that have presentations are being videotaped. So soon after the sessions are over, in a few days, maybe a week or so, all of the videos will be available online for you to essentially review them, or if you missed the session, you can basically catch up in that fashion. So, all right.
I'm Regina Bell. I'm from the Air Resources Board. I know the state has a project management classification, but it's very limited as far as its usage. Is that going to be expanded, since we need to have more professional project managers in the different divisions?
Well, I know Christy has plans to do training on a project management series of training. And now as far as DPA expanding the classifications, I'm certain. Does anyone else know?
I thought it was in the pilot program that was started at CDCR and expanded to information technology. Did you not have a pilot program?
I believe that's what they're intending to do.
Years ago.
Oh, when Christy comes. You could notify Christy Borchardt on the website and ask her. And she'll give you all the information she has.
Yes.
Fahal Ahmed, also from Air Resource Board. The technology letter when is that going out? Is that next month or is that October?
We're anticipating in September.
Finalized templates will be available.
Yes, everything will go out, the TL, the criteria, the evaluation criteria, the scorecard, frequently asked questions. And part of the problem, it's not really a problem. We were an agency and we were able to put things out. Now we're a department within an agency, so now there's a new process that we have to go through. So it's delaying things, which makes sense. And so we're just delayed a little bit, but the expectation is September, early September.
Any other question? Yes.
Do you have any periodic newsletter that comes out with the developments that are taking place? Because there are lots of changes that are taking place now, so to keep people informed of those.
I think there'll be several procurement.
On the procurement side, there's, just like Francisco said, there is a technology letter about the procurement change, and it is working its way out also. And the same with DGS, they're announcing one on their side and ours at the same time. So you should be seeing those soon as they get through the vetting process.
So how do I subscribe to those?
I think you're either on the distribution list for, like for example, under procurement, they send out blasts, as they call them, on those. On the technology letters, they're put out on our website, and then also the CIOs are notified when new policy changes are coming out.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this question is directed to Russ. I'm Michael from the Franchise Tax Board.
Hey,
So
Michael.
thank you all for your presentation, and I really like some of the things you're talking about. If we're just talking in terms of procurement, perhaps some of the issues, and there are a lot of issues involved, all the way from the
There's
department.
no issues in procurement.
Yeah, all the way from the department, all the way from the departments being us maybe not doing everything we should be doing, right, to get you guys good quality products. But it's hard to talk about improvements to the schedule without talking about legal service review. So my question to you is, what changes should we expect to see from, because the traditional process is it goes and gets reviewed for 2 months and then it comes back to make changes and it takes 2 months when it goes back. We find new changes, so 2 months back and forth. So what should we expect to see from the department end in terms of legal review?
We integrate our legal reviews a little bit better. I won't speak about someone else's legal review, but I know ours, we work very closely with our chief of counsel and his staff, and I guess I could say they're more integrated with us, and we don't seem to have the time delays, and we tend to collaborate a lot more on things. So in the procurements we've done, we've been in telecom now for almost a year and a half. We've had no delays that you would even notice, actually. There isn't a throw it over the fence, get it back. Our folks meet with them, we collaborate, we talk to them, and within days we're getting our answers back. So, and it isn't that give it to me once and then give it to me back again. We tend to look at it once and move forward. So we have not experienced in the last year and a half any substantial delays for as much as we've worked with them. And we don't use the same model as our predecessor did.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Carlos. You can't ask a question of your own people.
Director Ramos?
I just wanted to add in something too that might be helpful. Might be good to see again, by the way. So one other thing that I think you'll see different, we bring a different perspective to it, and I've talked to our attorneys about this. From my perspective, what I'm after is successful projects, right? Defending and getting ready for a lawsuit is fine, protecting the state is fine, completing a procurement is fine. But ultimately what we need successful projects. So I think the perspective our attorneys are gonna bring is a little different. They're part of getting us to a successful project. My own experience in other jobs that I've had is that when your agency doesn't have responsibility or accountability for the success or failure of a project, The perspective you bring is more about, okay, how do we prepare for a protest? How do we prepare for a lawsuit? How do we prepare for, defending the state in litigation? And then our perspective is gonna be, yeah, those are important. What's more important though is you turning the project successful. So I think that'll help as well.
Thank you, Director Ramos. Welcome. I saw you sneak in the back. I was going to put him on the spot, but he stood up and responded. So any other questions? Yes.
As a comment, you had stated non-delegated.
Reportable projects, yes. That's how our, if you read the new section, I'm sorry, I should stand up, but our new section in statute clearly defines that it's just a carve out basically of what DGS's authority was. And that is, it's non-delegated, which means your procurement threshold, and reportable, which also means your project approval threshold. So those two things working in concert or separately, depending on how, because you could have a reportable project that could be under your delegation that we would have to do for you. So it's kind of we kind of have to work between those two little boundaries. But we have no problems in collaborating like with dark departments like FTV and something who have larger delegations than most, so it should work out fine.
Other questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if Russ could talk to the difference between procurement delegation and project delegation.
Yeah, and well, that's what I was kind of alluding to, is that all departments have two types of delegations. And one is strictly on your procurement side that you've literally gotten through an application process with DGS, where they assign you delegation levels based on what they perceive your competency to be. And those vary in, for example, you can get a delegation strictly for using the CMAS and master programs. You can get a competitive delegation, which can vary anywhere between 5,000 to, you guys have what, 3.5 or 5 million?
We have 3 million, but I think OTEC has 5 now.
Okay, 5 million is a cap, and the lowest is 5,000. So you could land somewhere between there, and that is your procurement delegation of what you can procure yourself. Anything that isn't under those or is over those thresholds, you would have to go to either DGS or now us to do the project. Taking the other side of it, you have your project approval delegation, which comes through the technology department. Did I get that right? And I think finance is in there somewhere. I can't remember. Okay, just technology department. And that is basically what your project approval authority is. So a lot of departments have about 1 million, somewhere in that range. And that is what you have to do before you have to submit an FSR to the technology department. So if it's under your delegation for approval, you do it in-house. If not, then you submit it forward, unless you need a budget action again, or if it's a critical project. Legislation, yes, thank you. So there's some parameters in there, and those are actually defined in SIM and SAM. So those are when we talk about reportable and non-delegation, those are the two benchmarks that we use to determine if it would be done by our office or done by you. Does that help? Thank you. Yes, oh.
Could you also speak to associated contracts, say consultants or other types of contracts that go along with the project, but whether they're at DGS still or if they're
That also depends on how they are. If they're part of a reportable project, those, we'll call them ancillary contracts, would potentially go through us. If they're part of your operational base, for example, on your work group computing or those kind of things, or for productivity, those would fall under the authority of DGS. So there's that kind of balance beam on those. So a lot of folks do most of those. They'll be usually under those type of projects, unless you're on a mega project. Those usually fall under your delegated level, and you can do them under your CMAS or your MSAs or lighter weight RFO, RFQ type procurements under your delegation. Most of the ones I've seen. There are some that are larger, and then those would fall into more of a formalized procurement model. Did that help? Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to take a couple minutes and have the panel members address some of the lessons learned that you articulated. The first one is phasing of the projects. Any of you would like to address that as far as the future plans with regards to the approvals and procurement?
Phasing of projects, we do agree that projects should be phased. It's not that you phase it out to write separate FSRs, it's still potentially one project. It just says that you have the ability to stop after a set phase because that is a chunk of the project which can be measurable and you can live with that piece of the project if you cannot further continue. So we do suggest that phasing is done. It's not to have 3 separate FSRs instead of having one FSR that covers 3 phases. So if it is the same project, it should be in the same FSR. Does that make any sense? Everybody understand what I'm trying to convey? Okay, yes.
So when you do the phases, so you do phase 1 and time goes on and now you're looking at phase 2, you may need to adjust phase 2. So do you have to then do a second FSR for phase 2 even though you did it in the first one? Say there's 3 phases and you finish phase 1 and then you look at phase 2 and say we need to revamp this based on what we know now and the changes that have been made. Would you have to do a new one at that point?
Okay, to answer that, it should have been described all in the original FSR. If you go over 10% in scope, schedule, or cost, then you potentially would have to do an SPR, a special project report. We do have associated representation for each agency, which is listed on our website. So our person at our agency that is your representative would help guide you in determining if you needed an SPR and monitoring your portfolio. So potentially you would have to do an SPR, maybe stuff that you didn't understand or didn't know yet when you got to phase 2. I understand where you're describing it. But it would probably be an SPR, not a separate FSR, unless it's a separate unrelated project. It depends how your projects are defined. If you're talking phases like she was in the back, she was saying one project, but they did it in 3 different phases. As long as it is one project and it was defined in the FSR, if you get to the second phase and you're determining that we didn't know enough information, it's gonna take longer, we have to procure more, something, whatever else you have to do, we would have you do an SPR and help guide you. We'd work with you. It wouldn't be, oh, just do an SPR. We would work with you and help define what it is. Yes, so.
Related questions about?
I do. Actually, I want to go back to the phasing of the project. So I'm not clear. Are we talking about when we say phasing of the project based on the project management process phases? Or are we talking about specific deliverables based on the predetermined by the project? For example, you may be implementing the financial management ERP, which has 5 or 6 modules. Do you consider each of those modules as a phase of the project?
I think that's what's meant here, to where you define the entire ERP as a need, and then you do the general ledger and something else first to see how that folds. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Actually, is it Joni?
Tony,
You were the one that described your phasing.
Yes, and I'm not sure that I concur with.
Okay.
With what we're saying. With the timesheet process, when we sat down, we analyzed it. We did a systems analysis, but it was clear just with the systems analysis that these would be very good breaking points to not introduce at this time. The reason I kind of think that it should be supporting FSRs, like mentioned in the first one, that they would be future phases, but no sense in trying to detail it all out because sometimes that phase doesn't come for a year and a half or something, or 2. But all your numbers would be wrong and your dates would be wrong, and so it just seems like they could be somehow related.
I think it's going to take collaboration. If you have such an effort to do, I would advise you to bring in technology agency and discuss it with your representative on what is the best approach. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
I believe if it is an ERP solution, you would phase it down into reasonable phases of chunks of different components that you can complete within a set time frame. But it is still all the same project. depending on each project and what you're trying to achieve, it might be separate efforts. So it might not be one answer for all. Director Ramos has something
And
to
then-
add.
Debbie's trying to be very careful too about how she says things. I don't have to be because I'm So let me just add a little bit of context here too, what we're trying to do. You hit on a very good point. You know, one of the things the projects are always criticized about. You're late, you're over budget, right? And so to a certain extent, our efforts at remaking our processes is to say, let's get past that issue. And so you're absolutely right, you know, to try and totally cost everything out and nail down how much it's gonna cost, sometimes is a pretty ridiculous exercise. But you're gonna get criticized later on if you come back and say, well, we thought it was gonna take this long, it's actually gonna take, 6 months longer and it's gonna cost more. Which, when you're taking a total shot in the dark. So part of the effort at breaking it up into components is so you don't have to set those baselines so early. So you set them when you actually have a more realistic assessment or an idea of what it is. The other reality that we deal with is sometimes you run into vendors that are not performing. In the session next door, they were just talking about that. How do you deal with them? One of the things that we learned on some of our projects is if you have natural breaking points in a project, whether it's components or functionality or you're going to roll out a certain phase, it makes it much easier to separate yourself from those vendors or to hold them accountable to say, look, if you don't get past this stage, you're not going to the next one. So our efforts are aimed at that. So Debbie's absolutely right. One size isn't going to fit all, but fundamentally the idea of breaking up is it's an attempt at risk management, an attempt at getting more accurate alignment between budgets and schedules, as I spoke about this morning, and to give us the opportunity to have some flexibility in how we build our contracts and how we manage our vendor relationships. And I think it's going to foster more accountability.
Director Ramos, can I get you to join us up here so we can get the full video effect? No. I think there's some other scenarios that you may want to weigh in on in terms of collaboration. I'm sorry, there was a hand going up again? Okay. Going once. The next lesson learned had to do with schedule and cost estimates in the FSR, and I think we kind of touched on that in various degrees, that don't essentially materialize as anticipated. So how do we plan to deal with that in the new transformation of approvals and procurement? Here, I'll bring this to you.
Can we go to the slide?
Oh. Yeah. Go for it.
Actually, in the new model we're talking about, which is future state, looking here, at this point, you're going to actually come up with again, this is in the future after we do our pilot. At this point, the alternative solution, this is where your alternatives would come up, and you'd have your recommended solution, and this is where your first estimate would come at. And then you do your acquisition strategy. In this stage here, you now have more information, more requirements developed, and you'll have a little bit better estimate of what your costs are going to be. And then in stage 4, when you actually do your procurement solicitation and you choose your vendor, you'll actually have the cost, the real cost of your procurement. So that's how we're looking at changing things, or that's the idea today. Again, we're going to go through a pilot. We're going to work the kinks out, and we're also going to make sure that it marries up with process, because that's a real important aspect of this, because it's a big constraint. It's in cement, so we're going to adjust the model to match up with our state's budget process. So again, we really believe this is going to cure a lot of the being in front of the legislature, explaining why your estimate wasn't exactly the way it was supposed to be. And we all have that when we talk to our bosses and we give them an estimate, and then they run with it. And it's like, no, that was an estimate. And it's like, no, you told me this. And so this is going to help that. It's just going to be able to refine that cost from an estimate to an actual dollar amount with a bid that's submitted and you accept and you say, and then also going through the 6611, where you can negotiate with them and get a final offer and say, this is what we're going to do, and you actually have an idea on your schedule, and things will be better. hopefully. Doesn't mean projects still won't have issues, because we know they do. Things happen.
Francisco.
That's a question.
Well, one thing just to add because of Francisco is the BAFO, the best and final offer, we use that for our project. And so, you know, oftentimes when we're reviewing proposals from vendors, you know, they slightly interpret things differently, et cetera. And so we were able to provide some clarification, ask some clarifying questions, or if we saw they did something that would have been, would have removed them potentially, ask clarifying questions. And so the BAFO, the cost actually got adjusted, some, you know, cost came down, got some clarity around schedule, et cetera. So I think the BAFO process is phenomenal personally. So it just really helps you to get some idea and some negotiation before you select your vendor to kind of hone your proposal.
A few slides back on stage 1, I could have sworn that it said peer. Oh, there, the green one. That one. But why does it say peer at the bottom of stage 1?
Well, that was the original process of how we did projects. You would do your ITCP, your concept, then you would write an FSR, then you would do your RFP, and before you awarded, you had to do an SPR because now you got the actual cost. And that's what Francisco was just referring to. When you do your FSR up front, you're guessing, but when you finally get your RFP and work with Russ's group and get your BAFO, you have more realistic schedules, costs, and everything. And so you would do an SPR, and potentially if you got into future phases or you ran into trouble, you would potentially do more SPRs along the way. The pair is your final closeout of a project. So that was just how are projects done today. And what's changing is what he was trying to show you in this slide.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because it appears at the bottom of stage 1, and
it's on all of them.
It's not about stages on this slide. It's really about the current processes. How are we doing it now? The second column is how are we going to do it with the effect of the technology letter to put in, was it S1VA or SB1A? Sorry. And then the third is the potential of where we would be in the future with future changes. But no matter which process or which stage in the evolution of this, we'd always have the peer to do at the very end of a project.
And also, once I showed this, I actually realized that there should be something that indicates that project approval would be here, project approval would be here, and in this model, project approval is there. So I realized that, and actually we're gonna revise that so in the class that can be made clear. So every time we show or we go through this, I see things that need to be improved, and that's one of them, to make sure that, yeah, right today, this is project approval. In future, we're hoping that this is where it'll be. Yes?
Do you believe the new project approvals life cycle will eliminate the need for SPRs?
It will not totally. It will eliminate the need for an SPR because you've done your procurement and you were guessing, yes, because you're not going to actually have a project approved until after it comes out of stage 4. And I have to tell you, when I looked at this model, when they first showed it to me, and they said, oh, by the way, you're going to be the project manager over this, I said, this isn't going to work. But once you start looking at it and you start absorbing what it's actually saying, after a while I'm saying, wow, why haven't we done this before? So it's a re-engineering of the whole process. And if you really think about it, when you look at our process today, that's what's causing most of the problems for projects. You're guessing, and you're forced to guess. I mean, and then you look at past projects. Well, this database system cost 10 million, so let's say 15, and it's really out of the sky. Or you go to a conference and a vendor approaches you and says, yeah, I can do that for 15 million, easy. And well, then when it comes in, it's actually 35 or 40. So the process is causing us a lot of angst, and hopefully this will help us improve that. And then what Russ is doing definitely is going to help. So, any other questions? Not, I'm going to sit down. Oh, there's no one. See, I talk too much.
Stood up there too long. Just a quick question, hopefully, in the future release column?
Yes.
At what point do we go out, like say we need consultants to do the project?
Okay.
So at what point
because you don't have the RFP up there anymore, and you have procurement before the solution analysis. So at what point in time do you get the vendors?
The vendors will not be chosen until here.
I think
No, I think
what
it's
you're referring to is your consultant help.
Yes.
You'll be getting those in either stage 1, stage 2, depending on your resource needs.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't change. What we'll do when you meet with my team, when you do one of these, we're going to get into an MOU with you to help define that, and then resources are part of that discussion.
Okay.
So when you need someone, we'll be up toward 1 or 2 with those folks.
Gotcha.
Right, and you can see here acquisition strategy, Russ's group, procurement. So yes, they'll be involved with 1, 2, and 3. And actually, at stage 1, when in our process, we actually have critical partners that review it, and our EAs looking at it, the procurement group, the customer delivery division over at OTEC. A lot of people are involved in this process, and your information security.
Thank you. Let's see, go back to the lessons learned, a couple other scenarios. Okay, third lesson learned was the use of enterprise architecture and IT procurement plans as compared to the historical list. I think that was your that DGS may have. Any plans to basically deal with that, so that you're not dealing with archaic technology that DGS enforces, but technology that's more relevant to the dynamics of the business today?
Going forward, we are really trying to take more of an architectural focus on knowing more about the technology and the solutions that are being proposed by the vendors. So, and this isn't something that's totally new. FTB's done it on several projects, and also BOE's doing it on one of theirs right now. So, but we plan to follow that same model of engaging the enterprise architect for the vendor early in the conceptual discussions. And then if you're like me, an old dinosaur, that we used to do conceptual and detailed technical discussions which focused around the architectures and the proposed solutions, not just the answer yes to the 5,000 requirements and then we gave you a score for that. So we're looking to do more technical influence into the proposal evaluation, which means we want to look more at their implementation plan, more at their proposed architecture, and be able to evaluate those better. And actually, we're getting more engineering support internal to provide us that expertise too. So it's just not, as I'll call it, an administrative evaluation of the RFP now, or the proposal. It's more of a technical evaluation with that administrative piece. So we know what is going to be delivered in that solution before we award the contract. So I think that's maybe a little bit different influence. That's the model we're putting together now to deploy. It's not totally new. It's been used before very successfully, by the way, but we've only really seen it on the larger scale projects. What we'd like to do is drop that influence down into more of the mid-range projects that we're doing. So we think we're going to get better solutions by doing that. The more you can understand what that vendor's doing before they start developing, the better you are, in my opinion. And I think most architects will agree with me on that, because we've been implementing a lot of solutions and trying to figure out what it's going to do when we get it. And we should have known that before we awarded the contract.
Thank you, Russ. The next lesson learned has to do with better collaboration between departments and control agencies, and a list of individuals that are responsible for approvals and procurement. Any comments about that? I think that's kind of what the new process is, really a more of an interactive relationship.
It is a more interactive relationship, and we have been trying at Department of Technology to have our resources who are assigned to your department to collaborate on your portfolio and upcoming projects. Again, I said we have a list on our website of who your associated representative is, and Finance also has the same thing on their website, the list of who the representation are for everybody's department. So if you go to each website, you would see who your representative is, and they are there to help you and guide you And we do want to collaborate with you before you write an FSR. We don't want to wait till we get an FSR to start collaborating with you. We want to collaborate with you while you're doing your FSR to help guide you. And we'll pull in procurement and finance. It's not that you have to do this alone. We do want to collaborate with you and help guide you.
Thank you. The next lesson learned or
The state hiring process.
I think that it's the timing. You know, can state organizations, as an example, begin to advertise positions before the project is completely approved and procured?
Well, I know Fiscal, because I help oversee Fiscal right now. Fiscal learned from their lessons learned that they advertise before and say the position is available for hire on like 1 July, because each year they get additional resources, or at certain points and phases of their project, they have additional resources onboarding. So they start 2 to 3 months before that and start the hiring process, advertising, interviewing, but no one can officially be hired until the effective date. So they have tried to meet the date and get the staff in more timely. So, and it is challenging because each agency has their own HR that they have to go through in their processes. So again, it's not a one size fits all, but it is something that you might want to look at to advertise, but let them know for sure that they can't be starting until a set date.
So that's a method that Department of Technology and Finance are willing to support.
Well, you still
Without
can't
making a
hire
fine.
because Susan's
Right.
not going to give you money.
You have to have your positions approved.
Sure, no, absolutely. I think that goes without saying. But in terms of the procedural aspects leading up to that, is where the question or the observation came from.
From a department perspective, I think all these lessons learned are really about how do we move as quickly as possible and receive flexibility when we're working with our control agencies in order to have a successful implementation of the project, whatever that is, right? And I think from this, CTA is making a move to try to streamline that upfront process, which can take a long time. But it's not necessarily the entire compendium of work that must be done that we need to do statewide to be able to meet the fact that technology is changing every 18 months and legislation's coming out far frequently than we want, right? And so I think in starting the process, it's the first step. And so as they go through it and get communications, et cetera, we'll see if there's other areas in other departments, whether it's HR or finance or whomever. Because I know for CalHERS, because we have such strict timelines because of the Affordable Care Act, what people know as Obamacare, that's what we're doing, that we have been making, I think, great strides with finance, with CTA, in order to figure out how to be as flexible as possible to meet these dates. And so I think as they go through this process, it's just not all figured out now, right? So a lot of the questions are great questions, but I don't know that anybody can answer them right now. We just have to keep working together to get to that longer term solution.
And just to add on, part of it also is planning. If you know you're getting positions in July, and there's a ramp-up period, then you don't want to have work completed in August when you know it's not going to happen. So you have to sit down and really plan and say, you know what, it may not be till October, December. And you have to be realistic about that and admit that you're not going to be able to get there because there is that ramp-up period. And then being able to explain that that's part of your project planning. And I know it's difficult, but that's the way our process works, so we have to work around that.
Sure. Thank you.
Just one comment on that, because I want to make sure I'm understanding. In my opinion, this is something where we really need to do our homework and be ready to go, because I would never look at CTA and say, go find me resources or tell me how to do it. We have to be ready to juggle our workloads, to work with finance through the BCP process, to do our own hiring, right?
But we'll suggest, you might wanna try to start hiring 2 to 3 months in advance, because you have to advertise, get applications. So we'll provide you information that we've learned from other agencies going through.
Or you guys would ask the questions of, are you guys gonna be ready
Oh, we'll
to
ask.
implement?
And it does
We
take
will
a
ask.
departmental commitment to do the project. If you're not
Right.
internally committing resources to do this, then, you know, you're not serious about the project. And that's just,
Thank you. Before we adjourn, we have a few more minutes. I think we talked at length about collaboration between program, technology, and control agencies. I wanted to address the one with adequate training budget. I know that that's always a touchy scenario, making sure that training is provided across the board, including training your stakeholders about their participation in procurement. Any plans in that regard to support the departments? No plans?
Well, like I said, Christine Borchardt, our website, we do have training
Good point.
that's out there. As far as budget, every agency has their own budget. I have no control over that, I'm sorry. But we do offer various training. Not everything is a cost. Some of it is free, just like these seminars. We do encourage staff to attend and to gather whatever training information they can get.
All right. I want to thank you. Right now, we're standing between you and the lunch. So I want to thank the panel members for taking the time out of their busy schedule. So let's give them a round of applause. And thank you.
Busy. I was just here.
So thank you for attending. Really appreciate your feedback and comments. Have a great day.